Seeing this, Camus was about to scream in fear, but I immediately covered her mouth. Because this monster lives in places with very weak light, its vision is basically degenerated, replaced by extremely sensitive touch and hearing. However, just as we were figuring out how to escape from here, the giant spider suddenly opened its gaping maw and shot out green venom. Thick branches touched by it instantly corroded completely, showing its extremely strong toxicity. Seeing this, I agilely dodged each one, while Adolphe protected Camus with a magical barrier. Just then, a Hun shouted in fear. His long braid was contaminated by the venom. Noticing this, Ian immediately cut his braid and reprimanded him. "You're really an idiot. Knowing full well that the Madame Eight Legs has sensitive hearing, yet you deliberately make such a loud noise." As soon as she finished speaking, the body of the Madame Eight Legs prepared to launch an attack towards Ian's direction. Thus, Ian immediately ordered her subordinates to mount up and flee into the depths of the forest. At this moment, the Balaks scattered in small groups, while the Baskervilles and Morgs fled together. This difference was enough to make Madame Eight Legs switch its target to Adolphe and the others. Just then, a Morg mage gathered flames in his hands. From years of hunting experience, he knew that this was the weakness of insect-like creatures. As he launched his attack, it hit the monster solidly, causing a powerful explosion. Seeing this, the mage and the person beside him showed a look of relief. However, they completely overlooked the disparity in levels. Even if the spider's weakness is fire, in the face of an attack with extremely low lethality, it simply could not cause fatal damage. Helplessly, Adolphe was forced to continue running from Madame Eight Legs, but Camus' condition made it difficult for him. Suddenly, I had a flash of inspiration and came to a screeching halt. Turning around, Staffordshire immediately asked what I was planning to do. I responded seriously, "If we keep running away without resisting like this, everyone will perish under the attack of the Madame Eight Legs. We need someone to step up and temporarily hold off the monster's pursuit." To quell Staffordshire's insistence, I immediately challenged him. "Do you think you have the strength to face an S-level monster? If not, just keep running. And just ahead is Baskerville territory. We absolutely cannot let it set foot there. Otherwise, the consequences will be unbearable. So, the only one who might have a chance to complete this mission is me, and it must be me." I also left the decision to flee or stay and fight together to Adolphe. But with Camus' condition, Adolphe had to personally escort her to receive treatment. Ultimately, he made up his mind, which was to not waste the escape time I had created for the team. Seeing this, Camus cried his heart out, shouting that I must come back safely to see her. Hearing this, I was somewhat speechless. A single lie was enough to make everyone believe it was true. After all, even if I were to take him to the territory ahead, even with the temporary combined forces of Baskerville and Morg, they simply could not defeat the Madame Eight Legs. For me, this was undoubtedly the only opportunity to escape Hugo's surveillance. If I could pretend to die in this action, then I could buy time to learn and master the 10th sword technique. When I am proficient enough, I will no longer be manipulated by Hugo, or I could further perfect my skills to hide my true strength. Then, I would return to the Baskerville family. At this moment, the entity parasitizing my right hand, Beelzebub, was already starving. Simultaneously, the silhouette of the Madame Eight Legs also appeared above my head. At this moment, I will use all my strength without reservation, including the iron body granted by the waters of the Styx River, Baskerville's 5th sword technique, and the most powerful and important, the Beelzebub. Immediately after, I leaped into the sky, soaring directly over the top of Madame Eight Legs' head. Soon, it too sensed a terrifying demonic force, but I definitely won't give it any chance to take advantage. Just as my Beelzebub sword erupted with powerful demonic energy, I plunged it fiercely towards the top of the Madame Eight Legs' head. To fulfill my vengeance from my previous life, I absolutely cannot let this opportunity slip away. As the Madame Eight Legs began to emit cracking sounds, I surpassed the limits and broke through its ultimate defense. At that moment, my powerful strike also created a vast red light that filled the entire forest. However, seeing this scene, Camus was also deeply shocked inside, along with that powerless cry for help that she could not give. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself lying in a strange place, not knowing how many days I had been unconscious. Did I survive the battle against the Madame Eight Legs? Just then, I suddenly remembered the battle with the Madame Eight Legs. If it hadn't been frightened by the blinding light generated by the Beelzebub, I really might have died from being unable to defeat it. I underestimated the Madame Eight Legs' strength. Its attacks are like a nightmare for the current me. At this moment, whether it's muscles, bones, or blood vessels, pain is present everywhere. However, I still have no idea why this rope is tied around my neck. Could this rope have saved my life? But well, if things continue to develop as they are now, I will be able to implement my plan to escape Hugo's surveillance. Besides Adolphe and Camus, there were many other witnesses, so I don't need to worry about my death being proven. But when I stepped out of the simple tent, I realized that I had arrived at the barbarian tribe's encampment. It seems I was picked up by some enemy forces. Meanwhile, behind me, a female barbarian was quickly walking toward me, leading 4 slaves and preparing to execute them. I recognized that these 4 slaves were from Baskerville's third-rate clans, but I still couldn't understand why I was treated differently. Suddenly, someone behind me called out to me. It was a Hun, who had wanted to attack Camus again. Ian. Seeing that I had woken up, he asked, "What does it feel like to watch your own people walk towards death? I guess you must be feeling very desperate and in pain, especially since your crippled body can't fight back. If you weren't the commander's pet dog, I would have boiled you right away." Hearing the words pet dog enraged me. I was reminded again of the fate controlled by Hugo in my past life. No matter the cost, I cannot repeat the same mistakes in this life. The murderous aura I emitted in my anger also made Hun feel as if death itself had descended, but he quickly realized that I am now crippled, and then he swung his fist and struck me hard in the face. Then he scolded me to hurry up and follow the rope to find my master, as she was already at her wit's end. At this moment, I swore that when my body recovers, I will surely return the punch I received from that scoundrel with interest. Following Hun's advice, I followed the rope and successfully found its end. To my surprise, the so-called master turned out to be the barbarian tribe's genius girl, Ian. Seeing her still bathing in the river, I didn't know what to say, but just then, Ian suddenly ordered me to get down and yanked the rope to forcibly press me to the ground. Then, an arrow appeared and hit the tree trunk. Listening to Ian scolding those barbarian children, I realized I had been used as a target. It seems staying here really will be a torment for a while. After the scolding, Ian thanked me for saving her life before, and she also mentioned that she had saved me twice. Hearing this, I asked in confusion, "Did you set up this rope?" "I went back just in case. If I didn't, you would have died. Be thankful that I'm tenacious." Then, I asked again, "I am an enemy of the barbarian tribe. Why am I treated differently and not executed?" "That's because you seem to be of a high position within your party, so I thought I'd try to see how much money I could get for you. It looks like I'm in a real mess. If the barbarian tribe really negotiates with Baskerville for my ransom, then my plan to fake my death and everything that follows will be ruined." Just then, Ian suddenly gave a sly smile. "Unfortunately, I don't want money now. I just want you to be my slave." After saying this, Ian cut the rope that connected me with her sword. "Shall we decide on our titles first? Call me master." Hearing this, I stayed silent and stared at her. She laughed and said, "I like those rebellious eyes." However, Ian believes that before she can tame me, there's somewhere we have to stop by. I asked in confusion, "Where are we going?" "What do you mean? Isn't it obvious? You should give your greetings when you step into someone else's land. We're visiting the village head, the matriarch." As we walked towards the matriarch, Ian told me that in the barbarian tribe, if you don't have a place to sleep, you can sleep on your friend's hammock, and if you're hungry, you can get food from someone who's more affluent. It may mean nothing to outsiders, but to those who live here it's a very homely place. It'll be good for you to get used to this. Soon after, we reached the tent in the center, but what I didn't expect was, at the moment Ian entered, she called the person in front of her mother. Seeing her daughter bring a slave, and a male one at that, she joked, "It seems you finally brought the empirical boy you talked about every day." Ian immediately loudly interrupted, "I did no such thing." At this moment, I realized that the woman standing before me now is the night fox from my past life, who also left a scar on Hugo's nose and caused Adolphe to lose his composure. So, to test the current strength of the matriarch, I compared her with my past life's situation. My chances of winning in a direct confrontation are 0, and my chances of success in a surprise attack from behind are also 0. If it comes to running away, though there is a 20% probability, this percentage is not of winning but of surviving an escape from her presence. At this moment, the matriarch scrutinized me closely, seemingly not welcoming my arrival. Then, in the next second, she showed a puzzled look. "I feel like I've seen your face somewhere before," but she didn't say much else. After all, in her view, most imperial men look alike. Seeing that my identity had not been exposed, I felt relieved, almost thinking that based on her 7.5 years of intuition, she could determine that I am a close blood relative of Baskerville. Then, the matriarch questioned Ian, "What are you planning to do with him? He's no different from a cripple." Hearing this, Ian laughed and explained, "Mother, don't be fooled by his current appearance. He's the one who attacked the Madame Eight Legs. He'll be useful once he receives good treatment." Mother naturally understands her daughter's subtle intentions. She then cautioned Ian, "Taking action without knowing your place might come back to bite you. Well, it doesn't matter if his body is destroyed or not. If his seat is fine, then." Before she could finish, Ian interrupted her, "Mother, that's not it. I'm going to use him as a slave. I need a slave to support me during hunts." At this moment, the matriarch patted Ian on her head and said, "Well, it's up to the owner what they want to do with their slave." After meeting with the matriarch, Ian gave me my first task as a slave, to build a tent for myself. From now on, that place would be my dwelling in the tribe. After saying this, Ian couldn't help but giggle to herself, secretly thinking, there's no way imperial bastards would know how to build a house. Ordering a slave around is part of a master's competency. I should use this chance to rebalance the hierarchy between us. Soon after, Ian returned and looked puzzled. I had managed to set up a simple tent in a short time, and it even looked quite reliable. It seems that Ian's original plan was completely foiled, despite her having brought a whole bunch of useful tools. Looking at the tent I built, I was reminded of my past life's memories of warfare, a time of destruction. Most of the swordsmen from Baskerville would only wield swords to kill the enemy, which resulted in a fatal flaw of not being able to survive long-term outdoors. To address this issue, Baskerville started to take it seriously. Each child had to undergo trials in extreme environments. So, Setting up a tent was a minor task for me. Ayan then seriously started to inspect the tent in various aspects. Whether it was the drainage or the stability of the tent, everything was perfect. At that moment, I told her that I had noticed that the matriarch's tent had major issues, which would definitely become unstable in a heavy rain. If she wanted me to fix it, I'd do it. Without hesitation, Ayan agreed. The first thing we did was to mix lime soil and gravel to make bricks, then use animal fat to fire and strengthen them. After days and nights of brickmaking, Ayan and I went to the matriarch. With my bricklaying skills practiced over 2.5 years, the instability of the tents under harsh weather was finally resolved. Seeing this, the chief of the barbarian tribe was incredulous. It seems there are still things the imperial humans can teach them. Even in the worst weather, the tribe no longer has to worry about leaks and collapsing roofs. Thus, my next task was to work with Ayan to solve the 10 issues of the tribe. A few days later, I officially entered the miserable life of a slave, having to do all sorts of menial tasks like laundry and cooking every day. Finally, Ayan couldn't stand it anymore and asked me, "Do you really want to keep going like this? Haven't you ever thought about becoming a formal member of the tribe?" I responded indifferently. Doing chores is not such a bad thing. Indeed, it's better than the cutthroat Baskerville. Listening to my answer, Ayan knew I must have received professional training. However, on the way back, Ayan still insisted on persuading me to integrate into their barbarian tribe. She would also teach me how to survive and adapt here. But I wasn't interested in any of that until she mentioned that doing so could finally remove the rope from my neck. That caught my attention, so I turned around and asked if it was really true. When I asked what I needed to do, Ayan's response was, "Go on a hunt and capture a huge prey." Recently, the tribe's warriors haven't been able to catch large prey, causing the children in the tribe to not receive enough nutritional supplements. In other words, as long as you can change the current situation, changing your title from slave to commoner would not be difficult. And it seemed like you don't have a problem with moving light objects, so you just need to assist me. I'm telling you to be grateful that you're the slave of the Balak's hunting commander. Reluctantly, I also had to agree for now. After all, who could stand having a rope around their neck every day like a dog? At that moment, a figure suddenly appeared behind us, eavesdropping, and it was a Hun who wanted me dead. Disgusting bastard, I will make sure you pay the price. It's absolutely impossible for you to get along here. Soon after, we participated in the shamanic prayer ceremony. Legend has it that after killing the prey, death itself will descend, so to avoid accidental harm by death, one must cover their face in charcoal. Thus, hunters, before going out to hunt, receive blessings of charcoal under the guidance of shaman a human. But although this is a custom of the barbarian tribe, many do not approve of it and feel extremely annoyed. It seems that shamans everywhere are the same today. Their status in the tribe does not play a significant role. After receiving the blessings of charcoal, I was about to offer some insincere praise about Ayan's face, but she immediately got angry and wiped off the charcoal with her hand. "Shut up. I don't get along with the shaman." Then, she took out a strange collar for me to put around my neck. This made me extremely puzzled. "What is this? Why switch from a good rope to a dog collar?" Ayan explained, "We wear them so our necks don't get bitten by our prey." Hearing this, I did not ask further questions. After all, now that I am in a barbarian tribe, it is necessary to follow the customs and habits here. Once everything was ready, Ayan and I mounted a white wolf to set out, and she also reminded me to hold onto her waist tightly. However, due to having a fiancé back in the Empire, I did not heed her advice. This led to me losing my balance when the white wolf suddenly sped up, causing me to fall heavily to the ground. This made my already battered body even more battered. Seeing this, Ayan couldn't help but laugh out loud. "I told you to hold onto my waist." Just then, a Hun suddenly appeared behind us. Ayan immediately dismounted from the wolf to ask his intentions. A Hun sarcastically said, "Ayan, you seem to be very free, playing around with your slave. But let me make myself clear. I'm determined to catch bigger prey than you and stake my grandfather's honor to replace you as commander." Ayan ignored most of it but questioned the pledge. "Your grandfather only knows shamanic teachings. His status means nothing in the tribe." During their conversation, I finally sat up after resting for a moment. Little did I know, just this act, a Hun quickly lifted his foot and delivered a heavy blow to my face. "Useless bastard. Do you have the right to move while your master is talking?" At the same time, he also questioned Ayan. "You put a dog collar on this crippled slave. Do you expect him to fight alongside you during the hunt? Get a hold of yourself. He'll only be a burden." Hearing this, Ayan not only wasn't angry, but she also smiled and said, "I wonder, you should take a look at your waistband before saying those things." As a Hun looked down, his face showed shock. "Where did my arrows go?" I spat out a mouthful of old blood, taunting, "You should grab hold of your weapons as you would with your lover." Hearing this, a Hun's face grew increasingly embarrassed, and then, clenching his fists, he charged at me. But just as his attack was about to land, Ayan used the body of the bow to stop his unwarranted aggression. "Whose slave do you think you're punishing on your own accord?" A Hun immediately retorted, "He's a slave. He must be punished for insulting a Balak warrior. Commander Ayan, you go to great lengths to help him. Do you like this crippled slave or something?" Seeing things escalate to this point, Ayan, with no other choice, played along with a Hun. "Alright, a slave is a slave, and if he does something wrong, he indeed deserves to be punished. But I still want to make it clear to you, he's my slave, and you have no right to touch a hair on his head. Then, after Ayan finished speaking, she snatched up her fist and harshly gifted me a punch in the face, and the fresh blood from my mouth stained the grass beside the road. As for Ahun, who witnessed this scene, he was shocked by Ayan's actions. After the punishment was over, Ayan angrily said, "So, are you happy now? I know you're upset because you weren't able to catch a girl for yourself previously, but if you do that shit to my slave again, I'll beat you up. Are we clear? Knowing this, get lost right now. But how unlucky am I to have been kicked for no reason and now to have been given a punch?" As we continued on the White Wolf, Ayan apologized for what she had just done and asked if my face still hurt. Seeing that I did not respond, she anxiously explained it had to be done. Ahun's a petty and stubborn guy. That was the only way to stop his petty retaliations, but I still did not respond to Ayan's continuous talk. At that moment, Ayan suddenly did a big backflip. "Did that punch hurt your mouth? Or did the injury put your life in danger?" Reluctantly, I had to respond, "It hurts to talk. I've had these types of injuries a lot." Before I could finish speaking, Ayan leaned close to me and kissed my wound. Afterward, she shyly said to me, "Is there anything you want from me? Just name one thing. If it's something I can do, I'll do it." Surprised, I asked, "Really? Can I ask for anything?" Hearing this, Ayan pledged her honor. Of course, a Balak warrior doesn't go back on their word, so I lowered my head in thought, which made Ayan fantasize, wondering, is it really time to have children? But when I stated my request, Ayan's heart instantly chilled. "Teach me how to shoot arrows." Hearing this, Ayan's expression dimmed. "Then from tomorrow onwards, we'll be doing some special training." The next day, our training began. However, her way of teaching shooting is not well intentioned, mocking that I have no talent in this area while also wrapping her hands around my waist to instruct me closely. It's purely to lead me to the bridal chamber. Although Ayan insisted this was the best way, given my injury and the fact that my waist hadn't healed, she still deliberately twisted and held my body in place for a long time, convincing me thoroughly. Fortunately, at that moment, the white wolf Bakira suddenly emerged from the bushes, causing Ayan to stop pushing on my waist. Yet, I hadn't even rested enough before Ayan told me to quickly stand up. Bakira has already located the target. Following Bakira's lead, we arrived at a place filled with sharp rocks and very ordinary mountain stream water. But Ayan said seriously, "Don't be deceived by its appearance. This stream is where the ocean converges. The prey we want will come here to feed and dominate this area, and the food is exactly the fish that dream of crossing the mountains." My grandmother once told me a legend. Fish always believe that if they can successfully swim up the waterfall, they will evolve into powerful and fierce beasts. However, most frogfish give up halfway due to lack of stamina and fall from between the waterfalls, while some lucky ones may try again if they are pierced by sharp rocks. They also receive nature's punishment and become a meal for the forest ox bears. But at first glance, I was full of doubts because, from what I understood, ox bears did not look like this. Hearing this, Ayan explained, "This is not an ordinary ox bear. It was born from a superior bloodline that has survived countless battles of life and death, as you can see from its permanent scars." Therefore, I asked again, "So, our prey today is this one, right?" Unexpectedly, Ayan gave a negative reply. "I didn't ask Bakira to find a strong female ox bear. Our target today is a male ox bear coming to court the female." At that moment, their eyes met. Then the female ox bear began to fight fiercely. Before long, about a dozen male ox bears were beaten and fled in panic. This scene truly shattered my worldview, completely deviating from the usual patterns. In my understanding, in the animal kingdom, it should be the males who duel until a winner is selected to gain the favor of the females. Ayan laughed. "That's a flawed logic, because the animals here almost always defy the usual rules of survival. Strong females often choose the weakest mates." Surprised, I realized it was exactly as Ayan had said. Ayan continued, revealing the reason. "It's looking for a mate it can dominate because strong males, when overly excited during mating, can end up killing the female. It's similar to how the Balak warriors select their partners. Do you know what kind of spouses are most popularly chosen? It must be those with strong DNA genes, and even better if they are temporarily weakened by injury." Hearing this, I was puzzled. This just shows that the Balaks are only after the genes. They don't care about the men's looks or other aspects. At this moment, I am more determined that I must recover quickly, or I will definitely not be able to escape this damned fate. As for what we need to do next, we just have to wait, because during mating, the female ox bear will exhaust all the energy of the male ox bear, and as indescribable sounds echoed through the mountains, I knew the battle had officially begun. However, to ensure that the female ox bear could successfully conceive, over the next few days, I would follow Ayan's instructions and personally bring them food. At our makeshift camp, Ayan patiently explained the underlying principles to me. She held a pink fruit in her hand, explaining that anyone who eats one will have their combat strength increased tenfold, but it is also a harmful type of fruit as it consumes one's lifespan. Thus, the female, who's more intelligent, would understand our intentions. The male would also understand, but in order to handle the female, he has no choice but to eat it. However, just as I picked up the food Ayan cooked and was about to drink it, I couldn't help but complain about how the ox bears were mating like crazy. To this, Ayan replied, "Isn't that normal? I know all male Balaks are like that, but I guess imperial males aren't. Well, since you're from a geeky country, I suppose you just can't." At this moment, moment, I was utterly speechless. Meanwhile, Ayan's pupils suddenly contracted, and she quickly picked up her bow and arrows, urging me to get up and start moving, because the female ox bear has just emitted an angry roar. This means that she is pregnant, and she will now drive away the male ox bear, who has exhausted all his strength. Seeing the male ox bear really being driven out of the cave, Ayan explained the situation to me. After mating is completed, the male ox bear is no different from other animals invading the territory, so the female ox bear often warns him not to come back. However, this does not matter to us. What we need to do now is to follow closely behind the male ox bear. After enduring 4 days of continuous battle, it certainly wants to find a secluded place. The moment it falls into sleep is the best time for us to make our move. The scene changes, and Ayan and I arrive at a place of icy, snowy wilderness. Here, the cold wind is biting, and not a blade of grass grows, making it undoubtedly more suitable for hiding than the forest. It seems that the ox bear is indeed very intelligent, but in such low temperatures, my body quickly starts to feel uncomfortable. At this time, Ayan also notices something is wrong and quickly asks if I am feeling cold. If so, I can move closer to her. Otherwise, the drop in body temperature leading to body stiffness could affect our hunting operation. Upon hearing this, I ponder for a moment, then decide to trust that Ayan has no ulterior motives, and promptly embrace her waist to preserve my life. Instantly, Ayan's cheeks flush red. Just then, Bakira's reaction suddenly brings her back to reality. They were originally following the footprints of the ox bear, but now there is a break in the trail. That is to say, before Ayan could finish speaking, a pair of crimson eyes were staring fixedly at her from a crack next to her, and in the next second, the weary ox bear, realizing its tracks had been exposed, also decides to take countermeasures. Meanwhile, a Hun captured a 3-meter-tall spiked wild boar and brought it back to the tribe. Seeing this, the tribe members highly praised him. Furthermore, since a Hun accomplished this feat single-handedly, the tribe unanimously believes he will definitely become the next hunting commander. Hearing the tribe's praises, a Hun is extremely excited. Everything he has done is to replace Ayan. Under the tribe's adulation, he gradually loses himself and even mocks Ayan for having a disabled slave, probably unable to catch even a decent rabbit. At that moment, the ox bear that Ayan had targeted for her hunt suddenly swung its massive claws, charging forward with murderous intent. Ayan, though reacting in time, is momentarily stunned by fear and freezes on the spot. Fortunately, I quickly embrace Ayan's waist and lean back forcefully, thus avoiding a tragic disability. However, our severe imbalance causes us to fall heavily to the ground. Bakira, seeing his master under attack, immediately opens his big mouth and attacks the ox bear. Even though he successfully bites the ox bear's arm, the absolute difference in strength shows that Bakira's bite attack did not cause effective damage. Seeing this, I reminded Ayan to avoid direct confrontation with the ox bear. We should flank it from both sides and target its weakest spots. But as soon as I finish speaking, Ayan orders me to hide behind her as she wants to show her dignity as my master. Thinking about the punches I'd have to endure for disobeying an order, I can only honestly hide behind a large rock that's big enough to cover my figure. However, I still feel confused. Logically speaking, a slave should be on the front line, not being protected, right? I just can't understand the bizarre rules of this barbaric tribe. Meanwhile, Ayan, riding on Bakira, jumps back and forth across the rugged mountains. They plan to launch an aerial attack, rendering the bulky ox bear completely defenseless. After being hit by multiple arrows, the ox bear frantically hides behind the rocks, trying to avoid further shots, but it completely underestimates its opponent's strength. In front of Ayan's magic-infused archery, obstacles are as good as non-existent. Even a city wall could be penetrated and brought down by her full-force strike. However, what surprises me this time is that the arrow shot by Ayan doesn't directly pierce through the rock, but utilizes the air current generated from striking the rock to attack the ox bear hiding behind, even hitting its most vulnerable belly with precision. Such masterful archery makes me admire her ability to turn shooting into an art and flawlessly target the prey's weak spots, a skill probably only possible for descendants of the night fox. If we're talking about pure talent, Ayan's strength might well surpass that of the future Camomorg. At this moment, after receiving a fatal blow, the ox bear continually bleeds from its mouth. Realizing that its end is near, it decides to stop running and instead turns around and charges at the enemy attacking it. Seeing this, Ayan is not at all panicked, still steadily pulling the bow and continuously shooting at the prey's head. Seeing the ox bear in dire straits, Ayan once again infuses magic into her arrow, preparing to deliver a final, lethal strike to end its life. As the magic-laden arrow is shot, the surrounding air trembles slightly under the impact of the blast. Originally, Ayan thought the ox bear would completely fall after this powerful attack. However, in a critical moment, its eyes burst forth with ferocity, cleverly avoiding the attack by using its innate intelligence. Though its right horn couldn't escape, it successfully knocks away the enemy posing a threat to it. Ayan is violently knocked away by this strike, rolling out over 100 meters. At this moment, Ayan realized she had overlooked her mother's warning. When a fierce beast is on the verge of death, it will unleash unprecedented wildness and strength, attacking until it completely eliminates the enemy threatening its life. life. Meanwhile, the ox bear's figure is already closing in on Ayan, and the instinct of fear once again freezes her in place, knowing well that her life might be forfeited here. However, just as the ox bear opens its huge mouth, I can't stand watching any longer. You should have shown your dignity by now, right? Now, it's my turn. My eyes emit a fierce light, and following that, my right hand summons the Beelzebub, stabbing directly into the mouth of the ox bear coming at me. Instantly, a powerful flame bursts out. After being hit, the ox bear completely falls, dying with grievances. However, just as I am about to mock Ayan for her overestimation and forcibly rely on my injured body to kill the ox bear, my heart suddenly stops, and I collapse onto the ground. Soon after, the Balaks hold a ceremony, celebrating as they feast on the ox bear we captured. At this moment, Ayan teases me about becoming the hunting hero. She explained that the hunter who catches the largest prey receives the tribe members' respect and admiration. Additionally, the ox bear isn't just strong and fierce, but it's highly intelligent, making it an honorable catch. Just then, Ahun hands me a bowl of food made from the ox bear. However, when I notice that it contains less meat, I immediately complain. This angers Ahun, causing him to storm off. Ayan then told me that it's the tradition of the Balaks. The one who contributes the most in the hunt gets the least amount of meat and gains that much honor in return. Hearing this, I was puzzled. You become more honorable with less meat? Isn't meat better than some useless honor? However, what I truly gained from this hunt was not meat, but the kilogram hammer skill from the ox bear. This skill allows me to increase my body weight to a terrifying 600 kilograms while holding my breath. For someone like me who can hold their breath in the river Styx for up to 7 minutes, this skill is like cheating. Additionally, after the Beelzebub absorbed the ox bear, my body recovered a lot. At that moment, Ayan gave me a long intestine of the ox bear, saying that my food was not enough, but I immediately told her that I already got a portion of meat and a bowl of blood. However, Ayan insisted, "You must eat this. If your eyes are bad, you eat the eyes. If your heart is weak, you eat the heart." Seeing this, several women in the tribe actually ran over and loudly teased, "Captain Ayan, why would you give that to the slave? You're so obvious. We can see through your motives." Ayan strongly denied their accusations, but they seemed to all know exactly what that long piece of ox bear intestine was. Left with no choice, I accepted it and began eating. As I swallowed the ox bear's intestine, Ayan flashed a satisfied smile, truly pleased by the sight. As morning arrives, I went to a huge broken tree. Around it, traces of recent venom corrosion are still visible. It seems, just as Ayan said, the Madam Eight Legs really will be summoned here to feed. Yesterday, she has taken the most tender parts of the prey caught by all the tribe members and placed them all on this broken tree. At first, I was bewildered and asked, "Why are you placing the good meat here?" Ayan did not answer, but focused on looking towards the distant sky, then finally spoke, "We're offering this as a sacrifice to Madam Eight Legs. We're asking for permission to live in this dense forest." Until this moment, I realized that the fear displayed by Ayan and others upon encountering Madam Eight Legs was deeper than ever before. It seems, my reckless actions almost destroyed the entire Balak tribe. Soon after, as I walked past the elder's tent, I noticed a long queue of women from the tribe lining up. They were all dressed up, preparing to marry me, while I, completely clueless, remained unaware of the seriousness of the situation. It turns out, according to the tribe's rules, the greatest contributor of this hunting operation must marry any female from the tribe. Just then, the women in line suddenly show panicked expressions. Ayan has returned from hunting. She angrily scolded the group, "Damn it. I painstakingly distributed food to you yesterday, and today, you brazenly want to steal what belongs to me?" After hearing Ayan's words, everyone immediately appeared unconvinced. "The Council of Elders hasn't made a decision yet, so why do you say that the slave belongs only to you?" Ayan sneered, "If you think men from the Empire are better, then go catch one yourself. Use a rope to bring one back." However, those women still refused to give up. "We've gone to the Empire's border so many times already, and there's no one else like him." Seeing that they still wouldn't relent, Ayan narrowed her eyes, her tone chilling. "Really? There might be some in hell." As soon as she finished speaking, the unmarried women of the tribe were scared into running away. At this moment, Ayan was extremely frustrated. While I'm waiting for him to recover, those cunning girls might try to take him away. If I had known this would happen, I wouldn't have let him eat the ox bear's vital parts in front of everyone yesterday. Ayan looked around for her slave, completely unaware that I was standing right behind her. After hearing her words, I was utterly speechless. That is to say, the thing I ate yesterday was that disgusting stuff? Ayan immediately changed the subject. "In a couple of minutes, a ceremony to honor achievements will be held. At that time, you will become the most honored hunter of the tribe, and you will also be able to make a request to the matriarch and have it fulfilled." However, before I could think, Ayan had already planned everything for me. Soon, we arrived at the tribe's council hall. Under the matriarch's chairmanship and the gaze of all the elders and other tribe members, I put on the clothes of the tribe's most honored hunter. But what surprised me the most was the typically cold and ruthless night fox Aquila, who made me feel a kind of tenderness I had never experienced before, was actually smiling as she said, "You did well. It seems like you've recovered quite a bit too. How fascinating to think your recovery rate would be this quick. As a reward for your contributions yesterday, I will exempt you from your status as a lowly slave in the tribe. From now on, you will officially become a member of our big family." As soon as she finished speaking, the elder shaman a human coughed lightly, clearly not agreeing with the matriarch's decision to exempt an enemy from the empire. In fact, before the ceremony, Ian had already told me that a human is a Hun's grandfather, so his dissatisfaction with me was bound to be the greatest. At the same time, Aquila slowly stood up, then said, "Since you're now an official member of the Balax, tell me what you want. If you want to marry a woman from the tribe, I can arrange it for you. If you want one or more slaves, that's also possible." Upon hearing this, I pretend to close my eyes and begin deep contemplation. In reality, this part is also part of Ian's plan. After a brief moment, I slowly open my eyes, showing a resolute expression. "If you may, I would like to bathe in the hero's spring." However, as soon as I finished speaking, both the tribe members and the council of elders were all astounded. Aquila's expression also became serious. "Are you aware of what you're requesting?" I was just about to answer when I was interrupted by the shaman elder a human, who angrily rebuked, "What nonsense! What gives you, a foreigner, the right to be so arrogant? You should know, to enter the hero's spring, one must have praiseworthy battle achievements in the tribe to qualify." After hearing a human's words, a Hun also quickly chimed in, "That's right, to enter the hero's spring, one must prove their strength. It's not something just anyone can casually do." However, Ian was not pleased. In this hunting operation, he not only hunted the powerful ox bear but also provided enough food for the entire tribe to feast for 2.5 months. If that's still not enough to qualify, then tell me, what kind of achievements are considered sufficient? Following this, Aquila looked at me again, her tone somber. "What exactly do you know about the hero's spring?" I answered without hesitation, "The hero's spring. It's a hot spring where both internal and external injuries recover just by bathing in it. However, because the spring takes a very long time to accumulate, its use is highly valuable, and those who wish to enter must be among the strongest in the barbarian tribe." After hearing my explanation, Aquila's gaze brightened slightly, seemingly more appreciative of me. Then she fell into thought. Seeing this, other tribal elders also began to express their opinions. Some thought that the lowly foreigner should not be allowed to use the hero's spring. Others believed that I had exceptional talent and, if nurtured, could definitely become a powerful warrior. Aquila, on the other hand, was actually capable of fulfilling my request, but faced with the opposition of the majority and the strong resistance from the shaman elder a human, she found it difficult to make a decision at the moment. Just then, the sound of the bells suddenly came from outside. I looked puzzled and asked, "Is it war?" Hearing this, Ian explained, "This time, it's not enemies but guests. Moreover, the visitor is of great significance to the Balax." Aquila then immediately instructed everyone present to go and greet the distinguished guest. As for the matter of the hero's spring, she told me to discuss it further at another time. For me, this was a good sign. However, seeing that his own arguments could still not convince the matriarch, a flash of hatred briefly crossed a human's eyes. When Ian and I followed the sound and arrived at the scene, a large number of tribal people had already gathered. The sight that met my eyes shocked me. I saw countless merchants with their goods coming to the Balax. Ian then told me, "These people are here to trade goods. They will exchange the products they brought with the Balax for various precious materials. In return, the Balax can obtain rare goods that are only available in the empire." This left me extremely puzzled, because the flags on the merchants' carriages bore the emblem of one of the empire's 7 major families, the bourgeois family. But to enter here, one must pass through the territory guarded by Morgue and Baskerville. In that tightly controlled area, such behavior by merchants would never be allowed. Therefore, their only possibility is smuggling. As the merchants displayed various imperial goods, the Balax brought out leather and wool as items for exchange. However, the bestseller turned out to be glass orbs known as Dreamy Slumber, and I only took one look and determined that these merchants were committing fraud. They wanted to exploit the information gap of the Balax, exchanging items of very low value for extremely high-value goods. Fearing the merchants might recognize me, I immediately turned to leave. However, Ian suddenly angrily chastised the trading merchants. The reason was simple: she used a diamond and only got a corn cob in return. I thought she had finally seen the unfairness of the deal, but unexpectedly, she angrily said, "How is one enough? It should at least be 2. This left me utterly speechless. Seeing Ian's actions, the other Balax followed suit, eventually getting double the exchange items. Meanwhile, a little girl approached a merchant, wanting to exchange items for a glass orb. But when the merchant saw the item the little girl offered, his face showed disgust, and he harshly slapped the insect from her hand, then turned and walked away. The little girl knelt on the ground, anxiously checking on the injured insect. Initially, this was just an internal affair of the barbarian tribe, and I really didn't want to meddle, until that merchant casually said, "For a stupid barbarian, she's quite pretty. She could be sold for a good price as a slave." What a shame. Hearing this, I finally made up my mind to expose this long-lasting scam. I first stopped the merchant, telling him not to rush off, then firmly said, "This trade is invalid." Seeing this, Ian frowned, sensing something was amiss but not understanding why I suddenly decided to stand up for the tribe's people. At that moment, seeing a barbarian who could speak the imperial language, the merchant immediately put on a fake smile and greeted me, but I directly interrupted him, telling him not to change the subject. "You need to cancel all all of today's unfair trades. Unexpectedly, the other party vehemently retorted, "Nonsense. What is unfair? Moreover, this trade was permitted by the shaman elder on behalf of the forest god." Seizing the opportunity, I pointed to the vegetables in front of us and said, "The corn you brought is worth at most 100 gold coins each, but the diamond you took away is worth at least 2 million gold coins each. If you grind an ox bear horn into a billiard ball, it would be worth 1 million. It's the same price as the goblin but mushroom, a new medicine." Hearing my words, the merchant started sweating profusely in fear. And then, in my hand, I held a glass orb named Dreamy Slumber and said, "If you put this next to you, you'll certainly be drugged, and only dream of sweet dreams." On the surface of the glass orb, there are small holes and drugs fall out of them. The drug inside is a cheap drug that harms the body upon long-term use, and I know it's illegal to use it in the Empire. After saying this, I forcefully crushed the glass orb into fragments. Seeing that someone in the Balax understood these insider details, the merchant panicked and immediately signaled to his companions to run away. Meanwhile, because Ian knew a bit of the Imperial language, she seemed to hear the words drug, body, harm, and looked puzzled. I did not hesitate to confirm it. The next second, her expression turned incredibly angry. However, the merchant kept feigning ignorance until the next moment, when Ian swiftly shot him. With this, the entire tribe finally understood the dangers of the glass orbs. They were furious and collectively decided to confront the merchants for answers. Seeing the situation turning sour, the merchants dropped their goods and fled the scene on horseback. Seeing this, I immediately asked Ian why not pursue them, but the experienced Ian just said indifferently, "For beasts that live in large packs, injuring them and letting them go is also a hunting technique. They have the tendency to return to their pack when injured." Meanwhile, the merchants reached a camp. Here, a group of armed and vicious thugs gathered. It seems that tonight, a fierce battle is inevitable. After nightfall, Ian's scouting eagle flew back with information. "They're here." A cold glint flashed in Ian's eyes, and coldly said, "They messed with the Balax. There's only one way to take care of them. It's slaughter." Meanwhile, the merchants have also strategized and planned to secretly infiltrate the Balax's weakest guarded area to set fires and ambush. But on the road, the lead mercenary, a one-eyed man, suddenly starts mocking his own employer. "You must be shocked that those Balak bastards looted you. As expected, words don't work on those barbarians. You need to turn them all into slaves and sell them." Although the merchant endures the one-eyed man's verbal abuse, he still can't help but remind him, "It's your first time in this deep forest, so you don't know it very well. Defeating the Balaks in combat isn't easy." However, after hearing this, the one-eyed man still shows disdain. "If you were that scared, why did you bring us, the mercenaries? Weren't you going to turn the tables if you got caught? Also, we decided to split the gross earning in exchange for being your escorts, so if it comes to looting, can we treat everything as ours?" Reluctantly, the merchant was at this point no longer caring whether he could make a large profit. He just hoped that the one-eyed man's words were true, that they could wipe out the Balaks. Just then, a minor conflict erupted in the group over a match. It turned out that one of the mercenaries, a new recruit, was unaware of the taboos of the battlefield. On the battlefield, 3 people aren't allowed to share one match, but this new recruit wouldn't listen, directly grabbing the match to light his cigarette. He scoffed, "I don't believe in such superstitions." But just then, an arrow pierced straight through his forehead, followed by another, striking the person beside him, and even the one-eyed man. Seeing this, the merchant immediately shouted towards the back, "It must be the Balaks. Extinguish your cigarettes." Indeed, Ian appeared not far away, confirming the merchant's suspicion. But by then, it was already too late. Tonight, Ian would definitely not let those who dared to harm the tribe escape this forest. Standing nearby, I was completely shocked by the combat prowess of the Balaks. I had never imagined that each archer could accurately hit a target by the faint light in the distance. Just then, a group carrying barrels appeared in front of me. I immediately ordered, "Tie the barrels with ropes, then shoot them with arrows to the enemy's position." As each barrel was secured between the trees, a net was instantly formed above the enemy's heads. Seeing this, the mercenaries stood frozen, clueless about the Balak scheme. Then, in the next second, the barrels above, hit by flaming arrows, triggered a chain explosion. Fierce flames instantly engulfed the entire enemy camp, trapping the mercenaries and merchants in a sea of fire. Some screamed as they fell, even being directly consumed by the flames, turning into charred remains. Taking advantage of the chaos in the battle, I swiftly infiltrated the enemy and found the merchant previously wounded by Ian. At that moment, a fierce light shone in my eyes. On my watch, I would not let any outlaw escape. Seeing this, the merchant immediately realized his life was short, desperately trying to contain his fear while shouting frantically, "You'll regret it if you kill me." Then, he pulled out a permit. "This is the exploration permit I received from the Underdog City. It's the official seal from the newly appointed deputy consul. If you kill me, the Baskerville family will come for you." Hearing this, I lifted my head, no longer bothering to hide my face, and coldly said, "How strange. I don't remember permitting that." Seeing this, the merchant finally realized that the person standing before him was the new deputy consul he had mentioned. But before he could kneel and beg for mercy, my bow had already fired. One arrow precisely penetrated his forehead, and another shot into his heart, completely ending his life. Those who forged the Baskerville seal seal are to be executed. Suddenly, Ayan riding on Bakira rushed over, her expression grave. Stop wasting time. We need to leave immediately. Meanwhile, on the other side, the defending mercenaries also noticed something unusual. The previously fierce barrage of arrows suddenly stopped. They speculated. Could it be that the Balaks are retreating? The fact that they attacked us with fire means they're not confident. Chase after them. However, they did not realize that at that moment, a huge shadow had quietly descended behind them. The next second, the Madame Eight Legs used its terrifying limbs to instantly crush all the mercenaries. Seeing this, Ayan couldn't help but praise me. To calculate the Madame's appearance and think of using fire as a tactic, you've become a great Balak now. However, looking at the enormous eight-legged spider, my mind sank into contemplation. What kind of power is needed to defeat it completely? The scene shifts. Aquila once again held a ceremony in my honor. At the same time, she officially agreed to let me use the hero's spring. Everyone present tacitly accepted this decision. Only Shaman Elder a human was still reluctant, but he had no choice but to accept it. Afterward, Aquila commanded Ayan, take him to the hero's spring. Before leaving, Ayan couldn't resist mocking a human. Look at a human not saying a word. He said that the reason why the warriors were unwell was because they were cursed. Due to your actions, a human's words hold no weight now. After hearing this, I couldn't help but glance at him. It seems, this so-called shaman is nothing more than a fraud. The entire transaction between the Balaks and the merchants was just a grand deception. Night falls, and I finally immerse my battered body in the legendary hero's spring. Despite the distance, its effect was indeed as Ayan said. Although it's not as effective as the Styx River at Baskerville, it's better because there are no age restrictions. However, what I find extremely objectionable is that Ayan also joined me in the soak. I immediately questioned, don't you know that when two people soak together, the effect is halved? Ayan angrily retorted, don't be so petty. Since you've officially joined the Balaks, you should learn to give selflessly. Also, you should really thank Sir Adonai for finding this hot spring. He's the only person who can fight against the Madame Eight Legs. He's the best warrior among our legends. Hearing this, I couldn't help but tease. If that story is true, then I would definitely respect the strongest warrior. Upon hearing this, Ayan instantly became annoyed and said gruffly, believe it or not, it's true. However, after soaking for a while, Ayan's face suddenly turned red. She seemed to suddenly remember what her mother had said. He's a commoner now and has a good reputation within the village. When he recovers with the hero's spring and can become the man he should be, he's not that bad of a husband. Ayan murmured to herself, today, I'm going to make Vakir mine. Before long, Ayan suddenly spoke up. To be honest, I knew that those merchants were taking an excessive amount of profits. I had a vague idea, so it was good that we used this chance to get back at them. If you didn't do it, I would've. Hearing this, I casually replied, chuckling, I see. Noticing my playful disbelief, Ayan said, don't laugh. I genuinely knew that diamonds are more expensive than corn in the Empire. Hearing this, I couldn't help but mock her and asked, how much more expensive are they? Who knew? Ayan confidently answered, at most, maybe 20 or 30. It seems she knows nothing about the prices in the Empire, so I replied, wrong. The amount of corn you can get with one diamond is far more than that. Hearing this, Ayan's jaw almost dropped. She couldn't believe that one diamond could buy so much. However, the next second, she covered her mouth with her hands and said, hey, slave, I knew that. This made me angry, and I solemnly said to Ayan, my name or slave? Between the two, which do you want to call me by? I don't like keeping things ambiguous. However, as soon as the words left my mouth, Ayan's voice suddenly deepened, and then, she lifted her hand and gently cupped my chin, her gaze profound. I don't want to call you slave or Vakir. What I want to call you is. But before she could finish, four little kids suddenly popped up behind her. At that moment, Ayan's face turned extremely awkward. Before she could recover, the bunch of kids swarmed up, begging to play with her. I could only stand there in shock, completely dumbfounded. I really couldn't guess what Ayan actually wanted to call me. Meanwhile, as the kids played recklessly in the hero's spring, Ayan immediately became angry and loudly scolded. If you want to play, go play on the shore. This spring was gifted to Vakir by the matriarch. If the spring's effectiveness is halved, his recovery will take even longer. Hearing this, I immediately mocked Ayan. Didn't you say that the people of the barbarian tribe are never petty? Why are you now quibbling with children? Just then, a Hun came over with two little girls and told us, this is a command just issued by the matriarch. Due to the drug's side effects brought upon by the merchants, she told the sick children to go into the hero's spring. Upon hearing this, Ayan was so angry that she clenched her teeth, her expression darkening. Don't tell me she wanted to make a fool out of me. However, what I never expected was that a Hun actually took the initiative to express his gratitude for me. Thanks for helping my younger sister, and I'm sorry for misunderstanding you this whole time. To this, I simply responded nonchalantly, yeah, after all, this was something I should do. However, a Hun confidently reminded me, I'm apologizing here, and that's all you have to say. Hearing this, I showed a face of disdain and scoffed, a Hun, you have too much anger in you. Seeing a Hun's condition, the bit of unease Ayan once had was finally relieved. Vakir, cheers to you for becoming an official Balak member. In the blink of an eye, 2 years passed. A Hun and I sparred, but I defeated him before the first round even ended. Everyone present was incredibly shocked. Seeing that a Hun could no longer continue the duel, I decided to move on to more important matters. At that moment, moment, a Balak warrior suddenly said, "I heard that kid's archery skills can now match Ayan's. In my opinion, he's a monster now." However, another Balak warrior completely disagreed, scoffing, "I can hit a Hun's nose and make it bleed too." Hearing this, a Hun helplessly corrected his misunderstanding. "You're mistaken. His fist didn't hit me. It just stopped in front of my face. He made my nose bleed from the wind's pressure caused by his fist." At the same time, I stood before a massive stone wall with 6 deep indentations carved into it. Clearly, my skills had broken through to the 6th sword technique. Although there is still a long way to go to achieve the most complete and strongest 10th sword technique, to have reached this level at 17 years old is unprecedented in the history of the Empire. At the same time, I also have 6 mana circles. With this, I can be a high-rank graduator. With the assassination techniques I learned in a previous life, along with the newly mastered barbarian archery, the revenge plan is about to start ahead of schedule. The scene shifts to Ayan and I pursuing a large snake. From the traces it left behind, this prey is big enough to feed the entire tribe for at least 4 days. However, the usually cautious Ayan seemed preoccupied this time. When she noticed that I was observing her, her cheeks instantly flushed red, and she hurriedly turned back to Bakira to get something. She pulled out a dagger and handed it to me, saying, "The hunting group brought a dagger from an imperialist who trespassed the deep forest. Do you know anything about this emblem?" I looked down and immediately noticed the serpent pattern on the dagger, a distinctive symbol of one of the Empire's 7 great families, the Leviathan family. Hearing this, Ayan's gaze sharpened. "We thought it might have been someone's dagger from the mercenary group we massacred 2 years ago, but thankfully it wasn't. One thing that's bugging me is that in various places around the headwaters, they poured a red liquid from a glass bottle and retreated." Seeing my serious expression, Ayan softly asked, "Vakir, I have something I want to ask. Don't you want to return to your hometown?" Hearing this, I was momentarily stunned, unsure of how to respond. However, Ayan suddenly said, "To be honest, there was another imperialist who came to the deep forest. I think you were their goal." This left me in complete shock. Ayan paused, seeming a bit hesitant, but continued anyway. "That girl came to the deep forest. Moreover, she hasn't just come once or twice. Ever since the encounter with the Madame Eight Legs attack, she has been leading a search team, conducting a carpet search in the forest." At this point, Ayan's expression was complex. "Will you go with her? It seems like she cares about you a lot." I frowned, beginning to ponder my next move. But one thing is certain, I cannot go back. Although I do feel somewhat guilty about Camus's perseverance, but to annihilate Baskerville, I must conceal myself and advance to the 10th sword technique. Before that, any exposure is fatal. So confidently said, "I won't go back." After hearing my response, Ayan was stunned for a moment, then fell silent. But then, she showed a happy smile. "That's great. Vakir isn't leaving Bakira." On the other hand, I felt a sense of relief. It seems the people of the Empire don't know I'm alive. I need to return once I'm able to hide my power from Hugo without being noticed. But speaking of which, Camus has been incessantly searching for me, which might also be a task within the diplomatic efforts between the 2 families. I just remember that the relationship between the 2 families wasn't very friendly initially. Could it be that due to my death, this diplomatic tie has become stronger? Looking at it this way, I will eventually have to sneak out to investigate what's happening outside the deep forest. Just at this moment, irregular bubbles suddenly began to emerge from the pool, and then a giant fish leapt out. Ayan, seeing this, did not find it unusual because such a fish daring to jump from the water to land means that the rainy season is about to descend upon the forest, and judging by its size, this rainy season should be a long one. But what concerns me is not how big the fish is, but why there is a spear in its stomach. After I cut it open with my sword, what appeared before us was a corpse corroded by stomach acid to nothing but bones and tattered clothes. From the clothing he wore, Ayan dared to assert that the person swallowed by the fish was from the Rococo tribe, but this type of fish would not actively attack humans. They are so foolish they only prey on creatures that are already dead. Thus, to investigate further, we decided to head to the Rococo's encampment, as something might have occurred there. Soon, Ayan and I arrived at our destination before nightfall, but the scene before us made us gasp in shock. The entire encampment was silent as the grave. All the Rococo warriors guarding the entrance lay on the ground, their bodies already cold. Even more terrifying was that their bodies were covered in strange red spots. At the same time, Ayan also noticed something odd. Now, it should be mealtime for the tribe, but why is there not even a wisp of smoke at the Rococo encampment? Something's not right. Without hesitation, we immediately snuck in. However, there was no sign of any villagers' activity in the encampment, and it's impossible that everyone would be sleeping at this time. Judging by the number of weeds, it's been a while since this place has been looked after. At that moment, Ayan slowly walked up to a nearby tent, reached out, and lifted the curtain. Suddenly, countless flies swarmed out from inside the tent. As for the scene inside, it was so shocking that Ayan instantly felt suffocated. She quickly covered her mouth, struggling to suppress her urge to vomit, and yelled at me, "Vakir, there's a corpse here, already half decomposed by insects." However, the other side of my investigation was equally horrifying. Before I regressed, there had been an epidemic that spread throughout the deep forest around this time. The corpses and the red spots made it clear this was the Red Death. It was a highly contagious and terrifying terrifying plague. After infection, red spots spread across the body, accompanied by severe vomiting, diarrhea, general weakness, and extreme pain. Ultimately, the person is tortured to death by both mental and physical agony. In my previous life, this plague had erupted on a large scale, nearly wiping out the entire barbarian tribe. At that moment, Ian suddenly shouted in terror, "Vikir, we must leave here immediately. The Rococo village has been cursed." Hearing this, I calmly denied it and soothed, "There's no need to panic. From the symptoms of the deceased, this is just a contagious disease, and its ability to spread is not very strong. If you're scared, go back first. And what if you die because you got cursed? Then I die." Hearing this, Ian angrily asked, "Who said you can go ahead and die?" But I did not heed Ian's panic, instead continuing to analyze. It seems the Rococo tribe hasn't been completely wiped out. Judging by the number of bodies here, it's likely that some people left the sick and dying behind and fled to another place. I then decided to search for some useful supplies. However, not long after we started, a faint breathing sound suddenly came from behind Ian. Then, Ian let out a piercing scream. Terrified, her legs gave out and she collapsed to the ground. She trembled and pointed towards the tent ahead. Following her gaze, a child who seemed to be only 5 years old was standing there quietly. There's a cursed child. However, what I never expected was, Ian actually began to act unreasonably, saying she had twisted her leg and couldn't move. Seeing this, I couldn't be bothered with her and turned directly to approach the child, squatting down and look at the stone beside her. It seemed she was mourning someone's death. "Who are you?" The child uttered 3 words. "Rococo, slave, kitchen maid." Hearing this, I immediately realized this child was a slave taken by the Rococo tribe from the empire. So, I patiently continued to inquire, "What's your name?" The child initially replied, "Pomerian," but suddenly added, "La Baskerville." Hearing this, my heart jolted violently. To make sure I hadn't heard her wrong, I asked, "What did you just say?" The child lifted her hand and pointed to herself, saying, "Pomerian La Baskerville." Within the Baskerville family, there are 3 types of middle names. Names with Van represent side branches of the bloodline. Names with Lu belong to direct male descendants. Names with La belong to direct female descendants. And this little girl's full name is La. Furthermore, her red eyes and the locket necklace with a hound emblem on her chest all confirm that she carries Baskerville blood. At this moment, I opened the locket necklace, and what I saw left me in shock. Inside was an old picture, and the man standing on the left was my father, Hugo. Seeing this, I immediately questioned Pomerian. "Who are the people in this picture? What is their relationship to you?" However, my stern expression and cold tone frightened Pomerian, causing her to tremble and back away in panic. Seeing this, Ian said exasperatedly, "You expect a kid to respond when you ask like that?" Hearing this, I realized that I had been too hasty, but this was also because memories from my past life make me particularly sensitive to these matters, and I tend to lose control of my emotions easily. So, I made an effort to muster a gentle smile and asked again, "Pomerian, can you tell me who the people in the photo are to you?" Although Ian was still not satisfied with my demeanor, fortunately, Pomerian finally spoke up. She pointed at the photo and said one by one, "This is Grandpa, Mom, and Grandma." Instantly, my memory flashed back to many years ago when I had just been summoned by Hugo and appointed as a deputy consul. At that time, the butler John had said, "Actually, your father has always been a person very sentimental about his family." Even though many people outside do not agree with this assessment, in John's eyes, Hugo was indeed such a person. Your father loved his first wife, Lady Roxana, very much and cared for her dearly. Although Lady Roxana passed away from illness, that wasn't the reason your father's personality changed. When the sole bloodline born of your father and Lady Roxana, Lady Penelope, was taken away by the barbarians, that was the tipping point. At that time, Hugo went completely insane. He was determined to have the Empire station him at the border, and in the following days, he began an endless, frenzied slaughter of the barbarians. But in the end, he still couldn't find any trace of Penelope. It was only years later that Hugo became the cold and ruthless man he is today. Reproduction was no longer about nurturing a love's blossom, but about raising more merciless killing machines. At this moment, I silently watched Pomerian. I didn't believe it when Butler John first told me these things, but now, the evidence is right before my eyes, undeniable by anyone. However, what worries me the most is Hugo's hatred for the barbarians has already reached its limits. If he learns that his own granddaughter is of the enemy's bloodline, what expression would he have? But these are concerns for later. Right now, the most important thing is to ensure Pomerian is settled in properly. From her current state, it's clear she was treated as a slave among the Rococo tribe. As I was contemplating what to do next, Pomerian suddenly pointed at me and said, "Mom, hair, eye, same." I replied softly, "Yeah, the Baskervilles are all pretty similar. You could probably call me uncle." Hearing this, she stared blankly at the pile of rocks behind her, recalling what her mom had said. "Pomerian, if you ever meet someone with red eyes, please follow that person." Then, she grabbed my clothes and said, "Uncle, I'll go with you." At this moment, I finally realized this chance meeting had unexpectedly brought 2 stray dogs of Baskerville together. From that day onward, no matter what I was doing or where I went, Pomerian would never leave my side. The concept of loneliness seems to have been etched deep into her soul. Yet, even though Pomerian Ayan is willing to depend on me, I still feel that she shouldn't stay with the barbarians forever. At the very least, she should be sent to a developed area of the empire for formal education. Soon after, we arrived at the barbarian tribe's meeting place. Due to the threat of the plague, Aquila urgently convened a tribal meeting, aiming to gather suggestions from all elders to formulate a response plan. Moreover, the rainy season will continue for a long time. For the plague, this is undoubtedly the best environment for spreading. Suddenly, Shaman, a human, proposed a solution. That isn't a plague, but a curse. To lift it, we must sacrifice a great offering. However, I had already told Ayan that this plague has nothing to do with any curse. It is a contagious disease known as Red Death. Therefore, Ayan immediately dismissed the human's suggestion and proposed we should evacuate as soon as possible and look for a new settlement. No sooner had she spoken than Ayan was met with unanimous criticism from the Council of Elders. To them, this land has been home for generations, for over 100 years. How could they just abandon it so easily? Fortunately, most people were still rational. They agreed more with Ayan's proposal. What will you do if the plague comes and kills all the children? Who will continue our future? At this moment, the meeting room was divided into two factions, the Council of Elders and the villagers, and they were arguing incessantly, and the final decision lay tightly in Aquila's hands. Yet, they were all unaware of the severity of this plague, comparable to the Black Death that once afflicted the empire. This terrible plague truly spread like crazy and reached even the territories of the empire. Fortunately, thanks to Camus' fire magic and a saintess sent by the Quo Vadis family, the two barely managed to stop the spread of the plague. However, they only protected the empire, while most of the barbarians living in Red Black Mountain and the deep forest perished. This became favorable for the Baskerville family. As soon as the barbarians, who had a vital role in the ecosystem of the deep forest, disappeared, the lower-ranking demonic creatures proliferated their numbers beyond what was previously possible, causing a monster wave that led to many civilian casualties. The Baskerville family, who protects the border, were requested by the empire to start subjugating these monsters. In the end, they succeeded protecting the border, and as a result, Hugo's political influence grew rapidly. To prevent history from repeating itself, I decided to help the barbarians. I raised my hand, looked towards Aquila, and said firmly, I have a way to stop the Red Death. Then, following my instructions, they caught a few goblins and soaked one in a tub filled with river water. Shortly after, the goblin contracted Red Death. I immediately ordered them to throw it into the fire to prevent the plague from spreading. Meanwhile, Ayan curiously asked, does Red Death really transmit through water? Yes, the infected water is the main cause of the infection, but once you boil the water, there shouldn't be any problem. Hearing this, Ayan looked at the goblins and smirked, so boiled water is fine. The next second, she soaked one of the goblins into the boiling water. However, it immediately died. Seeing this, I told Ayan to let the water cool down before soaking the remaining goblins. Ultimately, the goblins that were soaked in boiled water showed no signs of the plague rash. At this moment, the tribe finally put aside their fears. They had finally found a way to overcome the Red Death. Aquila immediately praised me and thanked me, saying they could now see the light at the end of the tunnel. However, I calmly said, we can't let our guards down yet. It can transmit through the respiratory system, so please be careful when the fog is present at dawn. Meanwhile, Ayan mocked a human nearby, saying, didn't someone call it a curse? Hearing this, a human retorted loudly, don't delude yourself. In a few days, the rainy season will come, so how would we able to avoid water? With a human's words, the tribe's minds were suddenly clogged. The people finally realized that boiling water indeed had significant limitations. However, a human face suddenly changed, because I had already anticipated this potential problem and had come up with the most effective solution: relocate the village. There's a way to relocate the village without abandoning the land left by our ancestors. As time passed, a great rainy season finally descended upon the Red Black Mountain. Vast plains were swallowed by floodwaters, rivers swelled, and many areas turned into marshes. The deep forest, where the barbarians lived, was not spared either. Looking around, there was almost no place to stand. According to the records of the Elders' Council, this is the most terrifying rainy season invasion in history. Yet at this moment, they could still sit in their tents. All of this was thanks to my initial relocation plan, moving the tents to large tree trunks, connecting them in pairs, constructing simple ladders to ensure ease of movement. However, just as the new settlement was being completed, an uninvited guest arrived. Suddenly, a dark shadow emerged in the river water, and a monstrous fish burst out of the water, its mouth wide open as it lunged directly at two Balak warriors. In the nick of time, Ayan suddenly pulled out her bow and arrow and shot. The magic-infused arrow precisely hit the vital spot of the monstrous fish. Damn it, get lost. At this moment, I asked in confusion, what the heck is that thing? We call it Ka. However, seeing it destroying others' hard work, I didn't hesitate to leap down from the tree trunk, charging straight at it. At the same time, I awoke the long-dormant Beelzebub, ready to give it a good feast. The next moment, using the Baskerville's sixth sword technique, sword light flashed as I unleashed countless slashes, directly aiming for the vital points of the monstrous fish. It let out a hysterical roar, and the next second, it suddenly flipped over, darting into the river, frantically fleeing. Fortunately, the two Balak warriors warriors were safe. Seeing this, the Balax erupted in cheers. Vakir chased Ka away. Vakir is the true hero of the Balax. Only a human clenched his fists tightly in anger. On the other hand, Ayan excitedly gave a thumbs up, secretly delighted. Vakir is definitely a man to entrust one's life to. After the turmoil, I returned to the tent to prepare dinner. Originally, this meal was intended for Pomerian, but Ayan shamelessly followed along. However, seeing both of them immersed in the delicious food, showing satisfied expressions, I ultimately couldn't bear to kick out this freeloader. I don't remember inviting you to my house, nor did I prepare your share. Upon hearing this, Ayan immediately retorted, you are my slave. Whatever belongs to the slave belongs to the master. How many times have I told you that I'm not a slave anymore? This argument was watched by Pomerian from beginning to end. However, her next words left me completely dumbfounded. It feels like uncle and sister Ayan are a married couple. Ayan, of course, found these words most comforting. She scooped up Pomerian in an embrace, excitedly bragging, that's right, just like a married couple. You're so cute. As for me, I was utterly speechless. However, just at that moment, the tent curtain was suddenly pulled open. I instinctively turned to look, only to see a figure, under the backlighting of thunder, shuffling forward like a zombie. Ayan immediately demanded vigilantly, what is your intention for coming to Vakir's tent in the middle of the night? However, when we saw the face of the visitor, we were stunned. It was a Hun, and his eyes were already soaked with tears. Vakir, please, save my little sister. Meanwhile, at a Hun's residence, the girl on the bed was covered in sinister red spots, and she was also suffering from a high fever. Before long, Ayan and I arrived at a Hun's residence. At this moment, under the thick blanket, was a Hun's sister, afflicted with the Red Death. The spots on her body were spreading at a rate visible to the naked eye. Seeing this, I immediately asked the Hun, when did it start? Since yesterday. I think she entered the swamp when we were gathering wood for the construction. At the same time, Ayan also looked very anxious, urgently looking at me. Vakir, do you know what to do? However, just as I was about to detail the plan, a heavy footstep suddenly interrupted our conversation. Turning around, the one who walked into the tent was a Hun's grandfather, a human. Going around and not listening to her grandpa serves her right. This is what happens when you listen to the words of the imperial spy bastard. Hearing this, a Hun immediately gently advised, grandfather, don't speak so harshly. As soon as those words fell, a human delivered a vicious slap across a Hun's face. You useless fool, you're just as weak as your cowardly parents. After scolding him, a human propped up his umbrella, preparing to leave. But before stepping out, he stubbornly reminded them, this Red Death is not some so-called infectious disease. It is a curse from God. The only way to lift it is through a grand sacrificial ritual. Now that the situation has worsened to this extent, the matriarch will surely permit it. Hearing these words, Ayan clenched her teeth. As for a Hun, he silently wept. He was truly terrified that his sister, a Huel, would be taken by this disease. Just then, my words reignited a Hun's hope. I have a way to cure the Red Death. A Hun's head shot up, his eyes filled with shock and anticipation. But before anything else, I sternly instructed, all of a Huel's used belongings must be sterilized with boiling water. Additionally, burn wormwood over the bonfire to repel mosquitoes and bats. They are the most likely carriers of the disease. We need to create an environment for a Huel to combat the disease in order for us to buy some time. Upon hearing this, a Hun immediately wiped away his tears, regaining his composure. I understand. I will do everything perfectly. At this moment, Ayan began to truly believe that I could cure a Huel. However, just as I was about to explain the next step of the treatment plan, Ayan's expression suddenly froze in shock. I need your help. Bring me out of the deep forest, then I'll be able to get medicine for the infection. Hearing this, Ayan's temper flared instantly. Don't say such things. Even though you're acknowledged as a member of the Balax, there is a condition for going out into a foreign land. There's no way my principled mother would allow that. Even after hearing this, I remained completely unfazed. As long as you secretly get me out of the deep forest and bring me back unnoticed, no one will ever find out. At that moment, my eyes were filled with unprecedented determination. Ayan's heart grew increasingly conflicted, but in the end, for the sake of saving a Huel, agreed. After obtaining the specific route to leave the deep forest, I immediately set off on the journey back to the Empire with Pomerian. However, just then, I suddenly noticed someone was following me. So, I immediately stopped, turned around, and it was Ayan. Didn't you already agree to let me go to the Empire for medicine? Ayan's face was stern, and her tone serious. Take me with you, or just tell me where exactly are you going. However, both of these things are confidential to me. Even Ayan cannot be told. Thus, I rejected her requests one by one. Yet, Ayan asked again, then why are you taking Pomerian? Ayan looked at me deeply, her eyes filled with complex emotions. When a sword came out of your arm, and when you knew about Red Death, I didn't ask. Do you know why? The first time we met, you rescued me from a slave auction. That favor is a memory I can never forget. From the first day you became my slave, you obeyed every command of mine unconditionally. Although, as we spent time together, we became fellow tribesmen and our feelings grew closer. Vakir, for you, I am willing to give everything. Even if it means defying my entire family, I am willing. But in my heart, there's always been a knot that as soon as I hear the answer from you, you will completely disappear from my sight. However, just answer one thing. You'll come back, right? After saying this, Ayan slowly lowered her head. However, However, my words instantly brought a glimmer of happiness to her heart. I will definitely come back. Please wait for me. Meanwhile, in the city where I once governed, Chihuahua is up late, sorting through documents. At this moment, he walks to the window and stares blankly at the bright moonlight. He remembered the days when we worked together. Back then, although it was tough, it was full of meaning. That period of time redefined Chihuahua's life. However, what he finds hard to accept is that my farewell to the frontier turned out to be our last meeting. But the next second, Chihuahua's expression suddenly changed. As he saw me appearing upside down in front of him, Chihuahua's face turns pale, his lips tremble slightly, his eyes filled with disbelief. Am I seeing a ghost? I then flipped and landed on the window, then said, how have you been these years, Secretary General Chihuahua? Before long, I immediately explained my resurrection, and Chihuahua's emotions gradually stabilize. Who would have thought that the next second, he couldn't hold back and burst into tears. With tears streaming down his face, he trembles with excitement and says, I'm so glad you're alive. Seeing Chihuahua's undying loyalty to me, I finally feel reassured to entrust Pomerian to his care. Only at first, Chihuahua thought Pomerian was a child I had with the barbarians. Hearing this, I immediately deny his guess. Our bloodline is the same, so we look the same, but it's not what you're thinking. Then, I asked him if he can look after Pomerian, and since it's come to this, it would be best if he went through basic education with her. Hearing this, Chihuahua excitedly replied, it's been a while since I've gotten an order from you. Please leave it to me. However, upon learning that he really can't manage the entire city efficiently on his own, I told him to find Cindy Wendy, a criminal I released 2 years ago. This suggestion sounds good, but Chihuahua looks puzzled. But how do I find her? Do you remember the little girl who once I gave a reward of 10 billion gold coins? If my guess is correct, Cindy Wendy is probably there. If she refuses to cooperate, you can tell her that I'm alive. She's indebted to me, so she'll help. After explaining everything, I must quickly carry out my next plan, which is to find the holy water that can cure Red Death. After all, there's still a promise that I have to fulfill. Meanwhile, at the gates of the Quo Vadis family's city, a merchant is about to undergo a search by the guards. Seeing this, he immediately takes out his merchandise permit, saying familiarly, I'm a regular here in Quo Vadis city. Shouldn't we save some time on the search? The guards understood the merchant's intention to save time, but still firmly responded, rules are rules. We need to do at least a spot check. Just as the guard chose the barrel of oil, the merchant's expression suddenly turned frantic. It turned out that the barrel chosen by the guard was the only one with something hidden inside. The merchant thought he was definitely doomed. However, when the barrel was opened, the guard didn't find anything unusual. No problem, you can pass. Hearing this, the merchant finally breathed a sigh of relief, deeply exhaling. What appeared before him was the Quo Vadis family's district, St. Mecca. The merchant quickly made his way to a deserted alley, and then whispered to the barrel, there are no guards patrolling nearby. You can come out now. The next second, a person wearing a mask stood up from inside the barrel. This person was me, Vakir. My target was the holy water in the city of St. Mecca. To infiltrate successfully, I had to resort to this subterfuge, having the merchant who frequently entered and exited St. Mecca smuggle me in. As a reward, after the deed, I gave him a highly valuable item, an ox-bear canine. The value of this item goes without saying, but more importantly, it was a way to keep the merchant quiet, to prevent any leaks about my whereabouts. However, the rewarded merchant still looked as if he'd seen a ghost. To think he was submerged in the oil for over 2 hours. Is he even a human? Afterwards, I quietly slipped into the busiest center of St. Mecca, hiding atop the city's clock tower. Although this was not the safest hiding place, I knew from my past life that the Quo Vadis family was deeply influenced by religion. Whenever the clock tower chimed, everyone would stop, close their eyes, and perform a strange ritual right where they stood. Soon, the clock tower bell began to ring. At the sound of the bell, everyone immediately stood still and prayed. Even though I walked boldly through the crowd, everyone was so immersed in their prayers that they didn't notice me. When the night was deep and quiet, I finally found a well. Immediately, I took out a bottle of pink liquid, pouring it all into the well. However, this was not any ordinary poison or laxative, but a pathogen extracted from a hule's blood, sweat, and tears. Although this method is indeed extreme, it was the only way to obtain the holy water. But just then, 3 children appeared from behind. Seeing me sneakily busy at the well, they instinctively wanted to turn and run. At that moment, I sharply turned back, staring coldly at them, saying, children, listen carefully. This well has been cursed. Those who drink from this water will not be spared from death. If you want to live, remember what I've told you. No sooner had I spoken than the 3 children ran away in terror. Seeing this scene, I finally felt relieved. After such a terrifying warning, I guessed they would never dare to approach this well again. Then, I pulled out a dagger and plunged it fiercely into the ground. The hilt of the dagger bore the crest of the Leviathan family. You must know, the Quo Vadis family and the Leviathan family are mortal enemies. Just let the people of Quo Vadis believe that this well was poisoned by the Leviathan family, and it will surely cause a huge uproar. And that's it for my preparations. Next, it's time to find Dollars, the saintess of Quo Vadis. Meanwhile, even if it was late at night, the area outside the palace was still crowded with people. These people, almost all were nobles and officials from the city, basking in their glory and achievements. Some came to propose marriage, while others sought healing for their illness. At this moment, an ethereal female voice finally came from inside the palace. It was the saintess whom these people sought to see. Please stop. I'm uncertain if your identity or wealth is enough of a reason for me to open my gates at such a late hour. Please, do not linger here anymore. Hearing this, the crowd sensibly dispersed, but only I knew the real reason the saintess refused them. It wasn't because it was too late, but because she did not approve of anyone's requests. In my previous life, I saw her on the front lines of battle. Her white clothes, often stained with blood, strive to heal the wounded. However, she harbored a deep disgust for money and power. Just then, the saintess inside the palace suddenly questioned me. Who are you to come looking for me? Hearing this, I immediately knelt down. Then, with a sobbing voice, I spoke to the saintess inside the palace. I'm just a young lamb who has lost its way. Unexpectedly, the saintess, who didn't wish to see anyone, opened the door for me. Please come in. Of course, all of this was an act by me. To gain the initial approval of the saintess, I had to first appear devout and helpless. However, when I stepped into the palace, what greeted me was not the saintess herself but a statue. But this was all within reason. After all, how could the saintess personally meet a stranger in bizarre attire? When she saw me through the statue, she decisively asked, "How did you lose your way, young lamb?" Hearing this, I remained silent and put a water bag beside the pool. Then, with a solemn expression, I declared, "I've come to report that there's an epidemic spreading throughout the slums. I've brought the water from their well. If you truly are a saintess, you would naturally detect the wicked energy exuding from this water." Originally, I thought my plan would progress smoothly, but unexpectedly, the saintess revealed the truth. What you just said, all of it, was lies. Before I could speak up in my defense, heavy armored footsteps suddenly came from the second floor. Then, a fully armed guard squad appeared above me. The leader, with a deep and authoritative voice, asked, "Who are you?" I looked up, my pupils shrinking. That's a face I haven't seen in a while. Pietro Quo Vadis. I knew this person well in my previous life. He was the most righteous person I had ever known. But ironically, to eradicate all injustice, his methods were often more cruel than those of a demon. The tortures that the 7 young masters endured in the underdog city all came from his education. Meeting him again now, I did not intend to engage in small talk. I turned to leave and spoke calmly. "I have said all I had to say, and have made things clear. I should leave now." However, after saying this, a magical attack whizzed past me. "Did you think I would let a suspicious person like you just leave?" I looked at the pinned paper and couldn't help but chuckle. As expected, this life's Pietro hasn't changed at all, still likes to use strange things as weapons. On the other hand, Pietro leaped down from the second floor. "I can sense wicked energy coming from that water pouch you brought. If it really is an epidemic, then you're the one who spread it." I responded calmly. "If I'm the culprit, then why would I come here to report it?" But before I could finish speaking, Pietro began casting a spell, shooting dozens of magic-infused papers at me. But such attacks are no threat to me. I could even take them head-on without suffering any damage. It's just that now I cannot use any skills related to Baskerville, otherwise I would definitely expose my identity, and naturally, Hugo would soon receive news of my survival. It seems the only skill I can now use is that of the Beelzebub. I executed a move called the inverse hook strike aimed at Pietro. Although the move didn't hit directly, with the skill kilogram hammer acquired from hunting the ox bear, even a battle-hardened Pietro couldn't easily handle it. As I landed, I quickly dashed closer to Pietro, unleashing a barrage of punches too fast for the naked eye to catch. But the outcome was unexpected, as Pietro's book was hard enough to withstand my full-force move. Seeing this, I immediately used the killing technique acquired from Cerberus. Even if the book was very tough, fire surely conquers wood, and it was the unquenchable hellfire. Fortunately for Pietro, the holy water's healing saved his hand from being completely destroyed. The next second, Pietro gathered defensive magic in his hands, and then quickly swung both fists at me. Seeing this, I didn't dodge at all, but simply used the tip of my foot to flick up the still-burning book. Fearing the hellfire on his body, Pietro immediately switched his attack to defense. Little did he know, this move of his was the perfect opportunity for me to finish him off. After taking a direct hit from my powerful punch, Pietro crashed into a statue, shattering it to pieces. He then spat out blood and temporarily passed out. The soldiers upstairs, seeing this, were struck with fright. They truly did not expect the undefeated General Pietro to be beaten by an unknown assailant. However, to protect the safety of the palace, they still had to stay at their posts, risking their lives. Just as I was about to eliminate the soldiers blocking my way, a blonde girl suddenly appeared upstairs. "Stop, all of you." Upon closer inspection, this person was indeed the Saintess Dollars I was looking for. She then asked me, "Are you the lost young lamb? But seeing the destruction you've caused to the place, I think you look more like a small puppy covered in injuries. Come with me, let's sit down and have a proper talk." At this moment, I felt uneasy, wondering if Dollars had already guessed who I was. In the future, during the war against the demons, she treated patents on the front lines, saving countless lives. She is the living example of benevolence. During the time of ruin, like everyone else, every martial artist who encountered her, including myself, respected her. But just then, Dollars suddenly started talking about her daily troubles, saying that her recent stress was suffocating her. Originally, she had taken a vacation to relax for a few days at home but ended up being harassed by those people every day. The reason why she continuously rejected and disregarded the nobles and merchants who crowded at the city gate day and night was because the ailments they requested treatment for were trivial issues like marital diseases, athlete's foot, and bad breath. There is not one person who is gravely ill. Hearing this, I also felt sympathy, as it's simply a waste to use divine power on such trivialities. However, I quickly changed the subject. I understand your frustration, but the most pressing issue right now should be dealing with the epidemic in the slums. At this moment, Dollars interrogated my soul. Is that information accurate, and you're not involved in this incident? After hearing this, I didn't know how to respond, but being suspected was normal. It seems I now have no choice but to execute the next plan. Just as my hand moved slightly in my pocket, Pietro, standing by, immediately became alert and quickly stepped in front of Dollars to guard her, demanding, "What exactly are you trying to do?" The next second, a radiant divine power suddenly surrounded my hand, leaving Dollars and Pietro looking stunned. But since I could wield this power, Dollars assumed I must be a believer like her. Immediately, I patted my chest and spoke generously. "I truly don't want to see my homeland damaged, so can you now trust what I'm saying?" Dollars gave an affirmative reply, but she was still unclear about who would commit such a despicable act. Hearing this, I took out a map and suggested that the culprit might be someone wanting to see Quo Vadis family fall and profit from it. I then pointed to the Leviathan family on the map. Since they often engage in the research and production of poisons, they were likely to gain the most, along with the conglomerate bourgeois family. Moreover, if Quo Vadis were weakened, it would be icing on the cake for the Leviathan family's relatively unchallenged position. And since the bourgeois family are financial oligarchs, the death of workers would directly lead to the landlord's bankruptcy, allowing them to acquire top-quality goods at extremely low prices. However, I could make these detailed deductions thanks to the bourgeois merchants and the dagger found by the Balaks. So, I told Dollars that the Leviathan and bourgeois family might be closely linked to the current epidemic, though it was just a hypothesis of mine. After hearing this, Dollars was very surprised. She hadn't expected that I could predict the future course of events so accurately. This made her even more eager to find out who I really was. All I could tell her was the alias Nighthound that I was using in place of my real identity. But through her own eyes, Dollars could see countless whirlpools of emotions hidden within me: violence, hatred, frustration, the scent of a bloodthirsty beast, etc., with the most severe being an unfathomable deep sadness. Then, Dollars instructed Pietro that they must first visit the slums and then investigate the actual situation of the epidemic before reporting to their superiors. Upon arriving at the slums, the atmosphere was indeed more oppressive. When the local believers saw the saintess arriving with her guards, they immediately pleaded for her to heal the plague-stricken. At this moment, Dollars realized the severity of the situation, which made her fully believe what I had said. Meanwhile, I patiently surveyed the people lying on the ground. It seems that the method I used to scare the children really worked. All the infected were adults, yet I still had to apologize to them. Although the initial symptoms of the plague are not fatal, they still cause severe physical and mental torment. Next, it was time for Dollars to step in. She clenched her fist, made a prayer gesture, and then began chanting a holy spell, with her tears falling to the ground. Dollars' body suddenly shone with a golden light, bright enough to turn the dark night into day. Under the illumination of the holy light, the plague-infected patients were immediately healed. At this moment, the believers were shedding tears of gratitude. Now that the holy water has appeared, my next task is to find a way to deliver it to the barbarian tribe. Before long, looking at the newly added infected areas on the map, Dollars knew that the divine power was only a temporary solution to the plague and could not prevent new patients from emerging. Additionally, the analysis of bodily fluids extracted from patients showed that the plague has a very short incubation period. Although patients do not die quickly, they must endure severe physical and mental torment. Thus, to completely eradicate the plague, Dollars needs to focus all her energy on purifying the poison well with the purest holy water. The dilemma here is that if she is to fully contain the growth of the plague, she must abandon treatment for some patients. Just then, Dollars suddenly felt darkness before her eyes and collapsed to the ground, powerless. Clearly, the excessive use of divine power had taken a toll on her body. Yet even so, she persisted through the pain. She felt that if using a bit more effort could lessen the suffering of the afflicted, she would continue to treat them even at the cost of her life. However, just as she stepped out the door, the three noblemen who had previously sought redemption were standing outside the door, claiming they had brought 3 carriages of emergency supplies to alleviate the saint's burden. Yet the ugly faces they revealed next disgusted Dollars greatly. They felt that such dirty and damp slums were not places a saintess should visit. If these lowlifes got their hands on the emergency supplies, would they lose their original self-reliance? Upon hearing this, Dollars turned and walked away, but the 3 men were relentless and decided to die as her supporters. Hearing this, Dollars came up with a clever idea and turned back to kindly say, "Then I'll leave the distribution of the supplies entirely to you. Don't disappoint me." This statement immediately stirred up excitement in their hearts. However, when they arrived at the place where the patients were being treated, they immediately regretted agreeing to help the saintess. Everything here was so revolting that they felt nauseous. Naturally, this was what Dollars expected. For her, unsolicited generosity is suspicious, and well-meaning help with ulterior motives is nothing but an abominable act of desecration. Meanwhile, one of the believers had just treated some patients with mild symptoms. Seeing this, Dollars did not feel relieved. Now, she must go to more dangerous places where the most severely infected patients in the slums are gathered. Even though every place she visits is purified by divine power, relying solely on her own strength is ultimately not enough to easily resolve the situation. But just at the next moment, Dollars' expression instantly changed from serious to dazed, as I was replacing her position at that time. While treating a critically ill patient, I swiftly made an incision on the reddened skin and immediately utilized divine power to heal the rash along with the wound back to healthy condition. This scene also brought hope to the newly arrived priest, who recognized the treatment method of directly injecting divine power into the infected area. As for Dollars, she felt very impressed. She really did not expect that I could combine medical skills and divine power to such an extent. However, Dollars' reaction was within expectations, as she was the only one here who could maximize divine power. The reason I could use divine power was due to the karma accumulated in my past life. By killing demons for humanity, there was a chance to be recognized by the gods to use their power, possibly even a higher level of divine power. Normally, the devotion to the gods would depend on the amount of power received, which is the so-called 1-to-1 ratio. But with higher powers, it's different. They can break the original equation, turning the past 1-to-1 into 1-to-10, or even the 1-to-100 I have now. Just then, a little girl suddenly started crying. Seeing this, I immediately turned around and comforted her. "Your mom will be alright soon." Then, I took out a golden coin and gave it to the little girl to buy some nourishing food for her mother. However, my action was quickly stopped by the priest, indicating that materialistic aid is strictly prohibited in the slums. At the same time, the locals tending to their sick also saw this, showing a greedy look, which was exactly what the priest was worried about. In contrast, I remained calm, as my money was just that one bag. Though limited, I would give it to the patients who truly needed it. But at this point, I still had to say sorry. Hearing this, Dollars was utterly puzzled. She couldn't guess why I was apologizing. Everything done here was for treating patients. Could it be that he faced the same dilemma as me, unable to fully treat more plague victims? It seemed that because of the shared understanding earlier, coupled with the same trouble now, Dollars' heart unwittingly started beating fast. As morning comes, exhausted from treating patients, I drink some water and rest outside. At that moment, Dollars found me. Seeing her, I quickly asked, "Is there a new outbreak of infections in the slums?" Dollars gave a negative reply. Then she sat beside me and said, "Thank you for your help. If it weren't for you, the mortality rate in the slums would not be zero." I responded as best I could, without needing to be remembered. But just at the next moment, Dollars actually choked up. She told me that she really hated the title of saintess bestowed by God. Often, she felt powerless, just like during this sudden Red Death. Without my intervention, many families would have suffered from the pain of separation. She felt that she should not have the title of the saintess. God should grant it to someone like me, whose spirit, faith, and thoughts are all very strong. Seeing Dollars belittling herself too much, I immediately told her, "The reason God chose you among billions of humans is surely because you have the kindest heart. What this world needs is a light that can penetrate the source of all evils. At the same time, only someone as pure as you are qualified to shine that light." After hearing what I said, Dollars finally stabilized her emotions, and then, with tears, told me that she had found her purpose in life. The scene shifts, and it has been 7 days and 8 nights since I met Dollars. At that moment, a bundle of golden light suddenly shot up from a house in the slums. It turned out that during the days we were apart, Dollars had been concentrating on creating holy water dense enough to purify the plague, and just in case, she had also created 2 extra drops and stored them in a bottle. Afterward, Dollars entrusted the prepared holy water to the holy knights and asked them to place it in the underground vault of Saint Mecca. Seeing that it was still early, Dollars decided to do another thing. When she arrived in front of a statue of the goddess, standing below it and praying was the person Dollars wanted to find. This person was her father, Humbert, the cardinal of the Saint Mecca Cathedral. "Father, I am here to report on the recent plague incident in the slums." Upon hearing this, Humbert immediately stopped praying and turned to praise Dollars. "You have done something remarkable, just as I expected of you." Hearing this, Dollars bowed her head and responded, "You're too gracious." Then, Dollars told Humbert about her plan to tackle the plague. "I have decided to go to the slums, use a bottle of concentrated holy water, and drop it into the well that has been infected by the plague, as it is most likely the source of infection." Someone found the glass bottle used by the perpetrator to poison the well, and according to Pietro's investigation report, they also found 2 objects dropped by the suspect. Seeing this, what caught Humbert's eye was the emblems, signifying that it was from the Leviathan and Bourgeois family. Humbert immediately became furious, and countless golden lights began to emerge rapidly around him, and even the gravel on the ground floated under his authority. It seemed that Humbert was truly angry. How dare those lowly poison addicts and misers insult divinity, declare a holy war, and that guy who called himself the Night Hound, he's suspicious. Catch him right away and make him confess every single single thing. No sooner had he finished speaking than Dollars immediately angrily reprimanded her father. He is innocent. He's someone who did his best to treat the infected. The reason why there weren't any casualties is because of him. There's no way he's evil. But no matter how Dollars explained, Humbert still insisted on not changing his mind. For my daughter, who has never gone against me, to say that, I'm going to personally interrogate him. Saying this, he then gathered divine power in his hand, then shot it into the sky and commanded, all the holy knights in St. Mecca, I order you in the name of the cardinal, go and capture the man who claims to be the Night Hound immediately. In an instant, the holy knights mobilized, and their numbers were so vast that they quickly located the house where I was staying. But as the holy knights kicked open the tightly locked door, their expressions instantly stiffened, as the place was already empty. Meanwhile, at the cathedral, a believer frantically ran to report an emergency. Upon seeing this, Humbert immediately asked, what happened? The believer, panting, said, one of the 3 bottles of holy water stored in the underground vault has been stolen. Hearing this, Dollars suddenly realized, could it be that your purpose for coming here was just to obtain it? Meanwhile, at the top of the city walls, I was holding the stolen holy water, saying, thanks for this. After saying this, I swiftly left St. Mecca.